Over the years, Halo has seen a number of ports, reboots, remasters, and re-releases. From the original Gearbox port of Combat Evolved to PC way back in 2003, all the way up to the most recent iteration of MCC in 2019, there have been many different versions and releases of Halo. We've gotten things like Halo Anniversary in 2011, Halo Wars Definitive Edition in 2017, and various other ports and remasters. But perhaps the most infamous is Halo 2 Anniversary, which was bundled in with MCC back in 2014 in celebration of Halo 2's 10th birthday. The game, as many of you will recall, launched in a pretty bad state to say the least. Not only were the other games in the collection broken, but the prized remaster of Halo 2 the collection focused on so heavily in its marketing was also a mess, with problems like crashing, lighting issues, and lackluster performance even on the Xbox One, which was at the time the brand new console the game was supposedly optimized for. In the midst of these glaring issues and the chaos that ensued following them, something else would become completely overlooked with time. Something that could have been a massive success and the next step forward for Halo. Halo 2 Anniversary not only featured a graphically enhanced campaign, new cutscenes by Blur Studios, and the original multiplayer not quite exactly the way it was 10 years ago as promised, but it also was to feature a completely revamped version of Halo 2's multiplayer in a new engine with added features, weapons, vehicles, and of course enhanced visuals. To make matters even better, Max Hoberman, who had been a multiplayer design lead on the original Halo 2 way back in the early 2000s, was brought on by 343 to help create and reboot the iconic multiplayer. Throughout the course of development, things like previously cut weapons, the Hornet, Heretic Banshee, and the Gun Goose were all added to the game, as well as new game modes. Along with the addition of a proper infection mode also came brand new flood skins for the infected, and a red energy sword to boot, and let me just say, these guys were both amazing and terrifying at the same time. In addition, there were brand new interactive map elements such as waterfalls, collapsing ice shelves, and other destructible environments, giant shield walls that could be activated by players, and then you had these cool EMP towers that could turn the tide of a battle if you were strategic enough. All this making Halo 2 Anniversary's rebooted multiplayer truly the most dynamic we had seen yet. If that wasn't enough, there was also a brand new Forge mode with 3 different editing canvases, as well as useful features like locking objects and magnets ported over from Halo 4's Forge, as well as a brand new set of objects. H2A's Forge mode was, well, more limited than, say, Halo Infinite's or 5's, a lot easier to use and pick up for novice map makers. Couple this ease of use with the new dynamic objects, and H2A Forge was truly unique, as players with zero experience whatsoever could now make awesome maps like this one in the span of an afternoon. To this day, I'm still playing and making maps in H2A for use in the channel game nights. Discord link in the description if you want in on that. All these new features combined serve to not only remake Halo 2's fan-favorite multiplayer, but also to upgrade and expand upon it. While it certainly wasn't a one-to-one recreation of Halo 2, it really did feel like a proper evolution of Halo, an actual next step forward while simultaneously respecting the core gameplay of what made Halo Halo. Even the visual style was something to admire, an actual true blend of new and old. For the most part, but more on that later. So despite MCC's horrendous launch, H2A multiplayer specifically was noted as being one of the more functional and stable titles within the collection. It had a lot to offer, yet to date, over a decade later, almost none of what we saw in H2A multiplayer has been added into modern Halo. Not the visual style, not the interactive map elements, not the playable elites, easy-to-use Forge mode, and certainly not the classic gameplay we knew and loved. H2A is what the so widely talked about as of late alleged Halo reboot could have and should have looked like. H2A was, at the time, a promising look at what could have been in the future. It was a separate game in and of itself, it had its own engine, its own multiplayer, it was all set to go to become the next big thing. It was even on a new console at the time. So why is it that this game is seemingly completely forgotten? Nobody talks about it. It's near impossible to find a match of H2A 4v4 on MCC, and you'd be hard-pressed to find a populated server on the customs browser hosting it. 343 themselves barely gave the game any attention or recognition, only adding in a few cosmetics and basic armor customization all these years later. So what went wrong? For starters, while the original Halo 2's multiplayer appeared in MCC in its full, albeit extremely buggy to this day, unabridged form, H2A's rebooted multiplayer bafflingly only launched with 6 maps, that included remastered versions of Coagulation, Lockout, Zanzibar, Sanctuary, Warlock, and Ascension. Only one map in the form of a remastered relic, renamed Remnant for its anniversary version, would ever be added to H2A as an apology of all things from 343 for the collection not working properly on release. So over 10 years after the game's launch, Halo 2 Anniversary only has 7 maps, most of them being smaller in size. Compare this to the original Halo 2 multiplayer that contains 25 maps with a good variety of both large and small. Due to this fact, many fan favorites like Containment, Waterworks, Battle Creek, Burial Mounds, and others were never made in the new engine and thus left behind in H2A. Maps that would have looked and played great and provided many opportunities for the new interactive objects and expanded sandbox to shine, but they were just never added. Halo 2 Anniversary was very intentionally left unfinished. It was admitted to during the reveal of MCC that only a few maps were going to be remastered. But the real question I have is, why? To this day, over 10 years after release, we've never been given a concrete, definitive answer. Why did 343 remake 7 maps within their own engine with their own assets as a separate module on MCC just to release it incomplete and ultimately abandon it? It doesn't make any sense that 343 chose to go with an updated version of Halo 4's engine either, rather than just using the original Halo 2 engine with some kind of graphical overlay. They had already done this with the campaign, which had the Saber 3D engine running the new visuals on top of the original Halo 2 iteration of the Blam engine, so why didn't 343 just do the same thing for multiplayer so they could put the rest of the maps in relatively easily, instead of using a new engine for a game that wasn't particularly well liked by the community? Maybe Forge might have been a bit of a pain to implement, but what was the alternative? To tout a remastered Halo 2 multiplayer with less than a third of the original content? Yet, that's exactly what 343 did for one reason or another. And this is sadly a common theme with 343, where abnormally large portions of their games are cut for reasons that are just never explicitly revealed. The true tragedy with Halo 2 Anniversary's multiplayer, as well as the original Combat Evolved Anniversary, is that neither got the full remaster treatment. CE's remade maps were, like H2A's, also limited to only a few, and they were implemented into Halo Reach without the original gameplay or sandbox. Don't get me wrong, I loved their Reach iterations, but the lack of a proper and complete remaster was just lazy. Good remasters are supposed to build upon their originals and enhance what's already there, not detract from them with only a third of the content. While H2A did get most of the gameplay and sandbox aspects right, it, just like Combat Evolved Anniversary, lacked the majority of the maps. I also want to address some of the unnecessary gameplay alterations added in the reboot that weren't present in the original, specifically pertaining to the weapons sandbox. In the original Halo 2, dual-wielded SMGs were extremely powerful. This was a good way to give players that lacked a precision weapon a viable strategy, especially in close-range encounters. In Halo 2 Anniversary, however, for some reason the SMGs have been severely nerfed when dual-wielding, as they now fire much slower than their original Halo 2 counterparts. This essentially discourages dual wielding altogether, as the SMGs dueled with other weapons like another SMG or a plasma pistol or rifle are no longer viable to use due to the nerfs, and it becomes impractical to use dual wielding at all, thus essentially removing it from the sandbox as a viable tactic. Then you have the arbitrary charge-up time added to the Gauss Hogs. In the original Halo 2, you could just fire their turrets with one pull of the trigger. The same is true in subsequent releases. In H2A, however, 343 for some reason added a Spartan laser-like charging delay to the turret. It's not a long delay, but it does fundamentally change the way the Gauss Hog works. And then last but not least, a purely cosmetic change, but unnecessary nonetheless, is the fact that the beam rifle in H2A's multiplayer utilizes the Halo 4 version of the weapon for some reason, even though the single player uses a proper Halo 2 inspired model. Why did 343 feel the need to change all of these pre-existing aspects of the sandbox? The new content I mentioned earlier, like the assault rifle and the Hornet, for example, are welcome additions, but why change existing content? I think this is something that really turned a lot of classic fans away from the remastered multiplayer. Then there are the bugs. While the dev-made maps for the most part work surprisingly well in matchmaking, some Forge maps and custom games in general are a different story. H2A Custom specifically has been notoriously one of the buggiest, most broken games in the collection along with Halo 2 Classic. Again, this was supposed to be the main focus of MCC, a celebration of Halo 2 in all that it was, yet it's by far the worst put together game in MCC. If you go to boot up a custom game in H2A, you can expect a decent amount of crashing, random disconnects, performance issues, long load times, and audio bugs, especially with the battle rifle. This happens on both PC and Xbox One. The BR, since launch in 2014, oftentimes doesn't play all of its sound effects when reloading, especially if you're in a match with multiple players and there's a lot going on. I would speculate that this probably has something to do with the audio engine getting overloaded, but I'm not a game developer so I can't say for sure. But it has been an issue for over a decade that's still observable in 2025, and 343 refuses to fix it. Now let's talk about the Forge maps. Most of them, for reasons unknown, have horrendous lighting for the first minute or two of gameplay. At the start of every match, you'll get a generating lighting notification, but even after this is completed, Forge maps, and on rare occasions even some vanilla maps, are extremely dark. This bug happens and is easily reproducible almost every time a new Forge map is loaded. Again, yet another issue that still isn't fixed in 2025. So you can't go and say, well, MCC is saved, 343 fixed MCC, because objectively they haven't. Now let's talk more about the aforementioned visual changes, something that only got worse over time. First off, the elephant in the room, or the elites. These guys look nothing like they're supposed to in multiplayer. The single-player campaign for Halo 2 Remastered, that was done by Saber Interactive, not 343 I should note, the elites actually look really good. They look how they're supposed to look for the most part, but 343's elites in the multiplayer component of the game follow the same Hulk-like, lumbering, oversized art style that they did in Halos 4 and 5. And what even is that armor? Then you have the Spartans. The default Mark 6 looks okay enough, in fact certain aspects of it, like the helmet, look pretty cool in my opinion. But for some reason, 343 opted to use the Halo 4 styled armor for almost everything else, including both Mark 6 and the other armors added with MCC. None of these look anything like the Bungie era designs that they're supposed to be emulating. To add insult to injury, 343 added in an update a few years ago, despite massive fan backlash, literal Power Ranger armor. And whatever this is. This is, much like the Skyrim armors 343 forced into Halo 3 and Reach, not anything to do with Halo. At all. It ends up making the game look like a cheap Fortnite clone, which seems to be what 343 is going for these days. These unnecessary changes, combined with the extreme lack of content, almost makes me think 343 intentionally sabotaged H2A. It's like they didn't want it to work, because if it did, it would prove that classic Halo is what people really want, and as evidence over the last many years have shown, 343 hates classic Halo. And that's really a shame, because other than the nonsensical changes to the sandbox and the bugs and the weird cosmetics, H2A is actually a fantastic and underrated multiplayer game. It just severely lacks content and has been completely abandoned by its developers. I don't know why 343 and other studios seem to have something against properly remastering old games, especially when it comes to multiplayer. It kind of reminds me how Activision made the original Modern Warfare remake an exclusive pre-order bonus with Infinite Warfare, meaning that if you didn't buy the super expensive special version of their latest game, for a while you couldn't play the remaster of Call of Duty 4 at all. And then when they remastered Modern Warfare 2, they didn't do the multiplayer portion of that game at all. One of the most iconic Call of Duty games ever, they didn't do the multiplayer for. It's as if these modern companies know that whatever microtransaction bug-ridden garbage they produce today just can't hold a candle up to what came out more than 10, 15, or in some cases even 20 years ago now. Modern gaming is in a horrendous state, and they don't want you to remember what we had before. It's not because of the economy or a lack of ability on the part of AAA game developers, it's purely due to greed and the push for more corporate control. Remember, games like Modern Warfare 2 and Halo Reach came out in the late 2000s during the peak of one of the worst economic recessions in modern history, yet they still launched complete and functional, for a price that even when adjusted for inflation today, doesn't even come close to what publishers are asking for when taking into account most of these games lock customization behind $15 to $30+ skins. And then of course you still have things like paid DLC, subscription models, and egregious DRM that makes it so that if a developer or a publisher so chooses, they can take away the game you paid for at any time for any reason, even on consoles. This means if, for whatever reason, you get banned, be it legitimately or not, you lose everything you paid for. If the server shut down for a game that requires authentication or connection with those servers, you lose that too. But back to Halo. I've said this before in another video, but H2A and MCC as a whole was designed to fail on purpose. They didn't add more content because they didn't want to. It would make Halo 5 and Infinite lose players if they did. They didn't fix the bugs because they already sold you the game. They made their money and that was it. Remember, 343 had almost no interest in fixing MCC beyond half-hearted damage control press releases in the lead up to Halo 5. For years after Halo 5 released, MCC lay completely abandoned. It wasn't until the lead up to Halo Infinite, when Halo was at an all-time low in terms of popularity, that 343 decided to introduce only bare minimum levels of support for the collection, and even then it still wasn't fully fixed. I've seen some in the community shamefully claim that this lack of support and proper bug fixing for the collection is justified due to the fan backlash to 343's attempt to monetize MCC. But why should 343 be allowed to monetize a decade-old game that they released broken and never bothered to fix in the first place? An individual or a company promising to deliver a product or service for a fee and then failing to do so is not grounds for you to give them more money. 343 has done nothing but abuse its community into this weird Stockholm Syndrome state of forced positivity for more than a decade, and enough is enough. This is why, as usual, I implore you to make the intelligent choice to not support any of 343's future games. Do not play Halo Infinite, do not spend money on any of its microtransactions, and vote with your wallet. The biggest reason modern gaming is in such a state is because that there's a massive market for these broken, incomplete, and copycat gimmicky games. So stop buying into the hype whenever 343 or any other company shows some flashy new trailer that's almost guaranteed to look nothing like the final game. Stop buying battle passes, subscription services, pre-ordering, etc., whatever. Reject the AAA slop fest, and go play some decent indie games or check out some older games. Invest your time and money in something that's deserving of it. Until more people start doing that, Halo and the rest of gaming will never get better. We will never see another decent Halo game until this community stops making excuses and coping and puts their foot down. At the end of the day, we could have had one of the greatest remasters to ever exist with H2A, but instead we got an incomplete, broken shell of a game that still doesn't work over a full decade later and likely never will. It really is a shame because Halo had so much potential. At the time of MCC's original release, even I still had hope until I saw the absolute disaster and litany of excuses put out by 343 as they hurriedly rushed everyone over to Halo 5 and then eventually Halo Infinite without fixing or completing the collection. I love H2A multiplayer as a concept. A classic Halo with updated visuals, new stuff for the sandbox, destructible environments, and interactive maps would have been a fantastic future for Halo. That's pretty much everything I've always wanted to see out of Halo, except maybe a bit bigger scale. But other than that, H2A had everything I wanted. But unfortunately, the bare minimum amount of time and resources were put into it, and the lack of a complete remaster really showed that 343, once again, doesn't care for classic Halo. The former head of 343 himself even came out and said it. Quote, "Working on Halo was burdensome." And then, quote unquote, new management is unfortunately not that much different. Most of the people in charge now were the same people that were at 343 before the mass layoffs, and they were the same people that were working on MCC and Halo 5 all those years ago. Don't be fooled by the piss-poor attempt at them trying to rebrand themselves as Halo Studios. They can tell us all they want about how passionate they are or how much they claim to love Halo, but the objective fact is that their track record shows the complete opposite. And right now, we have no idea what they're even working on. The last we heard is that they're busy making highly detailed trees in Unreal Engine 5, and I quote from the current head of 343, changing the recipe for Halo games. Not exactly a good sign. On top of that, we know for a fact that Jen Taylor and Steve Downes, the voices of Master Chief and Cortana, were almost replaced in the past by them, and currently neither have been contacted by 343 or Microsoft in regards to reprising their roles for the next Halo game. Suffice to say, things look bleak, and I wouldn't expect a real decent Halo game anytime soon. I think Halo Studios is best summed up by a quote from the 1997 movie Starship Troopers that goes, "Something given has no value." 343 was given Halo. They did not create Halo. They did not earn Halo, and thus they do not respect Halo or its community. Both Halo's 1 and 2 anniversary were half-assed. Halo 3 anniversary was never made due to a lack of interest on the part of Halo Studios. They would rather make Halo Infinite. They would rather make their own vision of Halo, which is apparently a game filled to the brim with $20 or $30 microtransactions, weird Fortnite skins, and now apparently mental health awareness nameplates. Wait, what? First of all, how does this represent mental health? This is just straight up insulting at this point. I won't go into detail, but I've lost family and friends due to mental health related illnesses. I've personally witnessed some really bad things that I cannot talk about on YouTube due to how graphic they are. In my own life, I've faced my own struggles with this so-called mental health, but this is just disturbing at this point. The blatant pandering to anything. I mean, I don't want a mental health emblem. I don't want a skin or a coating or whatever. I don't need special recognition. I just want to play Halo. I want to play the game. What would help people's mental health is not nameplates or these random skins or whatever. What would help people's mental health is giving them an opportunity to kick back and relax after a long, stressful day with a well put together and complete remaster of their favorite childhood game. But no, 343 has no interest in doing that. The best they can do is more microtransactions. But that's it for me today. What do you think of Halo 2 Anniversary's multiplayer? And what do you think of the state of Halo as a whole right now? As always, thank you a tremendous amount for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end past my little rant. Leave a like if you enjoyed, and join the channel Discord if you enjoy my content and want to take part in some Halo game nights. I will be hosting H2A, I refuse to let it die. I have some really cool forge maps, including a backrooms infection map, which is honestly amazing. I'm really happy with the way it turned out, but that is it for me. Have a great day, and as always, stay safe. Goodbye.